Work it, make it, do it, make sense.
We're here at DevOps UK. I'm with Helen, who's talking about the DevOps Superpattern. I'm going to ask you a preliminary question.
Okay.
What's a superpattern?
It's like a pattern of patterns.
Okay.
So we kind of started with a couple of patterns. We were talking about like the harmonious polygamous marriage that is DevOps, made up of Agile, Lean and ITSM. And then I had another pattern that I was talking about quite a lot called the correlations between holacracy and DevOps. And then I met a chap who's quite significant in the DevOps world, John Willis, at a conference in Munich last December. And he said he had another pattern that he called his three-legged stool. So we took all our patterns and merged them all into one big pattern, and that's the super pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you find it easy to follow the super pattern?
I do, because probably because I've kind of seen it evolve. I think potentially, I have presented it quite a few times this year already, but I think potentially it might be baffling to people that are very new to DevOps, that are just kind of grappling with the kind of basic concept of development and the conflict that happens with operations and how to help them collaborate, and kind of incorporating things like what does safety culture mean and how does that relate to learning organisations and the 3 ways and stuff. It becomes a very big subject, but we can walk them through it. It's fine.
That sounds good. So we also talked about DevOps when we were emailing questions. So, and about the changing definition of DevOps and the evolution of what that term means, because does seem to be a bit of a conflict in the purely development community.
Yeah.
With DevOps, is that something we're going to embrace, or something we're going to ignore as a separate entity?
Yeah.
And what do you think about that? Do you feel that exists?
Yes, and from both sides of the fence, I think. So where DevOps really started was the recognition that there was a lot of siloisation in traditional organisations. So organisationally, you'd have a load of people reporting into head of dev, a load into head of ops. Some organisations we work with, they sit on different sides of a corridor, other ones on different floors, some even in different buildings in the same town. So there's a lot of separation, and that led to quite a lot of conflict. As pressure was building on businesses to deliver more digitally, the developers were being asked to push more change through, and at the same time with the operations people managing very complex, decades-old, very sophisticated but quite fragile infrastructures, and they were very accountable for stability and uptime. So you kind of had these people wanting to push through loads of change, these people wanted to keep them up, them not talking to each other very well, not collaborating very well. So you get these things like they just throw their code over the wall and they expect us to release it instantly, and we never know it's coming. And they're asking us for production admin access to production systems, and all this conflict's going on. So that's kind of where it started, but it's become, the super pattern really expresses how it's become much more encompassing in terms of the whole like best practice set for the value stream, the IT value stream, and the way that business is incorporated into that. And in fact, some of the work I've done in the past few weeks, we've done a few assessments, I've been doing some workshops and stuff, and it's got me really thinking that actually it's not even DevOps anymore, it's actually Biz IT. So I did tweet that earlier in the week, and I think I had a couple of retweets. I've obviously created a new buzzword, but haven't really. But that's kind of where DevOps is now, is really about incorporating everybody that's involved in delivering that innovation. And because innovation is so much about technology these days, it underpins everybody. Yeah.
We've had a few talks this conference about security and how important it is for developers not only to acknowledge the importance of security, but then to actually act on it. And that actually can be difficult sometimes because there's a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
Do you think DevOps is a way to solve that, because you're trying to increase communication between siloed bases and you're trying to share knowledge about very different things? How does security come into it and learning about it?
It's a very pertinent question. As I was in Belfast yesterday talking about the DevSecOps engineer role at the OWASP conference at InfoSec EU there, so very fresh in my mind. We have developed a whole course for DevSecOps engineers, and like many kind of pundits in the DevOps industry, I wrote articles in January about what I thought 2017 would look like from a DevOps perspective, and we all had in common that we all think security is a big part of what people will be looking at this year. Feel like it's maybe been a bit of an afterthought in the past. If you look at the DevOps handbook, it's actually in the subtitle, but it still doesn't appear until pretty much the final chapter in the book. So we may be a bit slow to incorporate DevOps. You know, John, the CISO in the Phoenix project, was kind of left out there in the cold for quite a long time. Although interestingly, I think it was him that was the biggest catalyst for getting that project back on track with the business. So to cut a long story short, we've said for quite a while that DevOps isn't one person's job, it's everyone's job, and we really feel the same about security. So security, through their own fault or everyone's fault around them, or nobody's fault, maybe it's just fact, have been quite separate, as you say, quite siloed. So what we're really trying to do with DevOps is not only bring security closer, so in the same way we're bringing ops in to try and contribute to the product backlog and get NFRs in early and that kind of stuff, we're actually trying to get them to help educate the developers more, so that developers have more understanding of what they're facing and what the organisation is facing, because attack levels are rising for everybody. It's becoming an increasing problem. And also to get the security people to help do things like integrate tools into the developer environments, so the IDEs, where they can get flags if they're putting artifacts in that aren't great, or if the developers aren't comfortable with being interrupted that way, then they can put things in the CI or the CD pipeline to break builds again if there's something that's not quite right. So yeah, I think that this year is definitely the year of DevSecOps in my mind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.